The phone rang at exactly 11:47 a.m. on Mother's Day, and with that single call, 32 years of my life shattered like the glass of orange juice that would soon slip from my daughter's trembling hands. I was standing in my kitchen, flour dusting my apron, the scent of vanilla and cinnamon filling the air as I pulled a homemade coffee cake from the oven. Lily was at the table, her small tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully colored the last petals on a card for her grandmother. Purple and pink crayons scattered across the surface, glitter glue still drying on construction paper hearts. She had written, "I love you, Grandma," in her wobbly 8-year-old handwriting, each letter a testament to the hope children carry so effortlessly. My phone vibrated against the marble countertop. "Mom!" The word glowed on the screen like a warning I should have heeded years ago. "Hello," I answered, wedging the phone between my shoulder and ear as I set the hot pan on a cooling rack. The voice that came through was cold enough to freeze the warmth right out of my kitchen. "Eleanor, you and that little girl don't need to come today. Mother's Day is only for the real family, for children who actually appreciate what they have." My hand stilled on the oven mitt. "What did you just say?" "You heard me perfectly well. Mark and Olivia will be here. Robert's already set up the champagne. We don't need your drama or your charity case daughter ruining a perfectly good celebration." I turned slowly, my eyes finding Lily across the kitchen. She was looking up at me now, her face still innocent and bright, clutching that card she'd spent 3 days making. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read my face. Children always can. "Mom, Lily made you a card," I said quietly, my voice strange even to my own ears. "She's been working on it all week." "How sweet. Mail it if you want. We have reservations at the Waverly at noon. Premium seating, and Eleanor, don't even think about showing up to make a scene. This is my day." The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence that follows the end of everything you thought you knew. Lily slid off her chair, walking toward me with that card held out like an offering, like a plea, like a prayer that was about to go unanswered. "Mommy, is Grandma excited? Can I talk to her?" She reached for my phone just as her other hand knocked against the glass of orange juice I'd poured for her earlier. It tipped, fell, shattered across the tile floor in an explosion of glass and golden liquid that spread like a stain we'd never quite be able to clean. Lily's face crumpled. "Oh no, I'm sorry, Mommy, I'm so sorry." But she wasn't apologizing for the juice. I knew that. She was 8, but she understood more than I'd given her credit for. She was apologizing for existing in a way that didn't please them, for being born to an unwed mother, for not having the pedigree they'd always held over our heads, for being evidence of my choices, my independence, my refusal to marry the man they'd chosen for me all those years ago. I knelt down, pulling her into my arms before the tears could fall, my hands shaking as I smoothed her dark hair. The card fluttered to the floor between us, glitter catching the morning light. "Baby, listen to me," I whispered against her hair. "You never ever have to beg anyone to love you. If they can't see how precious you are, they don't deserve to be in your world." I felt it then, that shift, that crack in the foundation I'd been standing on for 32 years. The desperate need to be enough for them to prove my worth, to earn the love that should have been freely given. It splintered and fell away, and what rose in its place was something I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten it existed. Rage. Pure, crystalline, righteous rage. I pulled back, looking into Lily's tear-filled eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. "Go to your room and pick out your favorite movie. We're having a Disney marathon with all the ice cream we want. Just you and me, Sin." "But what about Grandma?" "Grandma just taught us something very important, baby. She taught us exactly who she is, and I'm done pretending not to see it." As Lily ran to her room, I picked up my phone with hands that had stopped shaking, replaced now with steady, cold resolve. I opened my text messages and typed with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. "Message received loud and clear. I'll be canceling all linked cards immediately. Enjoy your celebration." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I opened my banking app. But before I tell you what happened next, before I take you through the most liberating and terrifying 24 hours of my life, I need you to understand something. If you've ever felt like you're not enough, if you've ever been told your love comes with conditions, if you've ever sacrificed yourself for people who would never do the same for you, this story is for you. So before we dive deeper, hit that like button if you've ever been the family ATM. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when the money finally runs out. And comment below with just one word that describes your most toxic family member. I'll read every single one. Now, let me take you back to where this all really began, because the truth is that phone call on Mother's Day wasn't the beginning. It was simply the moment I could no longer pretend. I was 23 when I first realized my family saw me differently than I'd hoped. Fresh out of graduate school with my architecture degree, I'd landed a position at one of Boston's most prestigious firms. The salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of, and the first thing I did was take my parents out to dinner to celebrate. Not at a chain restaurant or a casual bistro, but at Oleana, where the wait list was 3 months long and the wine list read like a novel. I remember my mother's face when we walked in, how her eyes swept across the intimate dining room with its jewel-toned walls and glowing lanterns. How she smiled that particular smile that meant approval, the one I'd been chasing my entire childhood. My father ordered without looking at the prices, and my brother Mark joined us late smelling of cologne and excuses about traffic that I would later learn meant he'd stopped at a bar first. The bill came to just over $400. I pulled out my brand new credit card, the one with my name embossed in silver letters, and signed the receipt with a flourish that felt like victory. "Well," my mother said, dabbing her lips with the cloth napkin, "it's about time someone in this family started contributing properly." Something in her tone made me pause, but I pushed it aside. This was bonding, I told myself. This was family. 2 weeks later, Mark called. He needed $3,000 for rent. He'd been laid off, he said, and his landlord was threatening eviction. I'd never heard my brother sound so desperate, so small. I transferred the money that same day. 3 months after that, my mother mentioned in passing that she'd put my card on file at her salon. "Just as a backup," she assured me, "I'll pay you back." She never did. By the time I was 25, I was carrying not just my own expenses, but a growing percentage of theirs. The family cell phone plan, my father's car payment when his hours got cut, Olivia's credit card debt when her shopping habits finally caught up with her. Each request came wrapped in family loyalty and remember, when we helped you and this is what families do. And then there was David. I met David Chin at a gallery opening in Cambridge, both of us standing in front of the same abstract painting, both of us tilting our heads at the exact same angle, trying to figure out what we were supposed to be seeing. He made a joke about the price tag being more abstract than the art itself, and I laughed for the first time in weeks. He was kind, stable, an accountant with a mortgage and a retirement plan, and absolutely zero tolerance for drama. We dated for 18 months before I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it also wasn't unwanted. We talked about marriage, about buying a house with a yard, about building the kind of life where children grew up secure and loved. Then David met my family. It was Thanksgiving, and my mother had insisted on hosting, despite the fact that her kitchen hadn't been updated since 1987 and she'd burned every turkey she'd ever attempted. David offered to help cook. Mark made fun of his tie. Olivia asked him within 5 minutes if accountants actually made real money, or if it was just glorified bookkeeping. My father barely looked up from the football game. And my mother smiled her approval smile and said, "So, David Eleanor mentioned you have some investments. Have you ever thought about diversifying into restaurant ventures? Robert and I have been looking at this opportunity." I watched David's face, saw the moment he understood exactly what this dinner was really about. Saw him add up numbers in his head the way accountants do, calculating not just the financial cost, but the emotional one. He proposed anyway, 3 months later at the Boston Harbor with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes while seagulls screamed overhead and the sun set over the water in shades of orange and gold that looked like a promise. 2 weeks before our wedding, my mother called. She needed $10,000. The restaurant investment had fallen through and now they owed money to people who didn't appreciate delays. She needed it immediately. She needed it quietly. She needed it because family helps family, Eleanor. Or have you forgotten where you came from? I had $10,000. It was sitting in our joint wedding account, David's and mine money we'd saved for our honeymoon in Portugal for the photographer who'd been booked for a year for the dress I'd found at a tiny boutique in Beacon Hill. I stared at my phone at my mother's number glowing on the screen, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Because that's what they'd trained me to believe, that their needs superseded my wants, that their emergencies erased my dreams, that good daughters sacrifice. I transferred the money. David found out 3 days later when he checked our account to pay the caterer's deposit. I'd never seen him angry before. Not really, but anger wasn't quite the right word for what I saw in his face that night. It was disappointment profound and quiet, the kind that changes the way someone looks at you forever. "You gave them our wedding money," he said, and it wasn't a question. "They needed it. My mom was desperate." "Your mom is always desperate, Eleanor. Have you noticed that every time you have something good, every time something is just for you, suddenly there's an emergency only you can fix with your checkbook?" "It's not like that." "Then what's it like? Explain it to me." I couldn't, or wouldn't. The truth was too ugly, too close to the fear I carried in my chest like a stone. That if I stopped paying, they'd stop loving me. That my value was measured in direct deposit. That I was only worthwhile as long as I was useful. David gave me an ultimatum that night, standing in our kitchen with the wedding invitation spread across the counter like accusations. "I love you, Eleanor, but I can't build a life with someone who's already building theirs around people who are bleeding her dry. You need to choose." I chose them. I always chose them. David left the next morning. He packed his clothes, returned the ring, and walked out of my life with a sadness so heavy I could feel it settle in the air long after he'd gone. The wedding was canceled. I lost the deposits. My mother's response when I told her, "Well, you clearly weren't ready for marriage anyway. Now you can focus on family." And I did. For 7 more years, I focused on family. I paid for Mark's 3 subsequent apartments. I covered Olivia's dental work when she refused to pay her insurance premiums. I financed my parents' anniversary trip to Napa Valley. I bought Christmas presents and birthday gifts and graduation presents for cousins I'd met once. I showed up to every function, wrote every check, swallowed every slight with a smile that grew more brittle each year. When Lily was born 2 years after David left, the product of a brief relationship with someone whose name barely matters now, my family's reaction was surgical in its cruelty. My mother refused to visit the hospital. My father sent a card with a check for $200 and a note that said, "For the baby's needs." As if that covered the cost of their absence, their disappointment, their fundamental rejection of my choice to be a single mother. Mark texted me, "Guess you're really determined to do everything the hard way." Olivia posted on Facebook about family values and the importance of traditional family structures, a passive-aggressive sermon clearly directed at me. But Lily, God, Lily was perfect. 7 pounds 3 ounces of pure possibility. Dark curls and serious eyes and tiny fists that gripped my finger like a lifeline. I looked at her in that hospital room with its antiseptic smell and fluorescent lights and the hum of machines, and I made myself a promise. I promised her I'd be better. I'd do better. I'd teach her to value herself in all the ways I never learned. But old patterns die hard, and guilt is a hook that never quite releases. By the time Lily was 8, I'd taught her to be small around them. To be quiet, to not make demands or have needs or take up too much space. I'd taught her that love was something you earned through good behavior and that family was something you tolerated rather than enjoyed. I'd taught her every toxic lesson I'd learned, passing down dysfunction like an heirloom I didn't know how to break. Until Mother's Day, until that phone call, until my baby girl's face crumpled and I finally saw what I'd been enabling all along. After I sent that text canceling the cards, I sat on my kitchen floor in the broken glass and spilled juice, and I opened my banking app with shaking hands. The interface loaded slowly, each second stretching like taffy. Authorized users. There they were. Patricia Vance, Robert Vance, Mark Vance. 3 names that had had unrestricted access to my accounts for nearly a decade. 3 people who had never once asked if it was too much. I clicked the first name. A pop-up appeared. Remove authorized user. This action cannot be undone. Cannot be undone. The words felt like magic, like a spell I'd been waiting my whole life to cast. I clicked confirm, then again and again. Remove user. Confirm. Remove user. Confirm. Remove user. Confirm. The notifications started before I'd even stood up. Text messages flooding in a digital tsunami of outrage and disbelief. Mark, what the hell did you just do? My phone rang. Patricia. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Robert, voicemail. Mark again, voicemail. Then a number I didn't recognize. I answered out of curiosity. Ms. Vance. This is Sarah Chin, manager at the Waverly. I'm so sorry to bother you, but there seems to be an issue with your family's payment method. They mentioned you'd be arriving soon with an alternate card. I walked to my balcony, the cool May air kissing my face. Boston stretched out below me in the afternoon light. I won't be coming, Sarah, and they're no longer authorized users on my account. Oh! A pause filled with understanding. I see. Should I run the charges already incurred? Yes, but only what's already been served. No champagne they haven't opened. No dessert they haven't eaten. Basic entrees only. Understood, Ms. Vance? And Sarah? When my mother asks who authorized this, tell her I did. Tell her the woman whose daughter wasn't good enough for Mother's Day made the executive decision on how her money gets spent. I heard the faintest intake of breath. Yes, ma'am. I hung up and turned back inside where Lily had emerged from her room, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, her face still streaked with tears. Are we in trouble, Mommy? No, baby. For the first time in a very long time, we're exactly where we need to be. The next few hours unfolded like a fever dream. My phone became a weapon of mass communication, buzzing and ringing and dinging with escalating desperation. The family group chat, which had been silent for weeks, except when they needed something, suddenly exploded with activity. Mark sent a photo from the restaurant. Him, Patricia, and Robert standing in the lobby. My mother's face pinched with fury, my father's blank with confusion. The caption read, "Fix this, now." Then came the voicemails, 10, 15, 20 of them. Patricia's voice progressing from shocked to angry to pleading a greatest hits compilation of manipulation tactics. Eleanor, this is your mother. Whatever's going on with your account, it needs to be resolved immediately. We're in public. Do you understand in public? Eleanor Marie Vance, you pick up this phone right now. This is beyond disrespectful. I raised you better than this. Sweetheart, honey, I know you're upset about earlier. Maybe I was a bit harsh, but you're making a scene. Please just call me back. I deleted each one without listening to the full message. Lily and I made a pillow fort in the living room. We watched Moana twice. We ate ice cream straight from the container. We laughed. Actually laughed, the kind that comes from your belly and leaves you breathless. And I didn't answer a single call. Around 9 p.m. as I was tucking Lily into bed, my phone rang with a number I didn't have saved. A 617 area code, Boston. Hello? Ms. Vance. This is Linda from Family Mediation Services of Boston. Your mother, Patricia Vance, has scheduled an emergency session and listed you as a required participant for tomorrow at 10 a.m. I almost laughed. Almost. Did my mother ask if I was available tomorrow at 10s? Well, she indicated that you'd want to resolve this matter as quickly as possible. Of course she did. Linda, I won't be attending. Please note that in your records, any future appointments involving me require my explicit consent given directly by me, not assumed by someone else. I understand. I'll make that notation. Thank you. I hung up and realized something crystalline and clear. This wasn't about reconciliation. They weren't trying to apologize or understand. They were trying to regain access to my accounts, access to my resources, access to the parts of me they'd always valued most. Everything they were doing, every call and text and attempted ambush was strategic. Emotional manipulation wrapped in family obligation delivered with the expectation that I'd crack under pressure the way I always had before. But this time was different. This time I had looked into my daughter's eyes and seen what my compliance was teaching her, that she was less than, that her pain didn't matter, that she should accept crumbs of affection from people who saw her as an inconvenience. I would burn down every bridge before I taught her that lesson one more time. The next morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Birds sang outside. The coffee maker gurgled its familiar song. Lily ate her Cheerios and asked if we could go to the park. Everything seemed almost peaceful. Then my phone started. 8 a.m. 15 missed calls before I'd finished brushing my teeth. 23 text messages. 6 voicemails, and then the piece de resistance, a call from my bank. Ms. Vance, this is Trevor from Citizens Bank Customer Service. Your mother and brother are here at our downtown branch requesting access to your accounts. They're insisting there's been an error in our system. I sipped my coffee, savoring its warmth. There's no error, Trevor. I removed them as authorized users yesterday. That action was intentional and will not be reversed. Yes, ma'am, I've explained that. However, they're quite insistent and are demanding to speak with a manager. They seem to believe you're being influenced by someone or that you're not in your right mind. Of course they did, because the only possible explanation for my boundaries was that I wasn't thinking clearly. Not that I'd finally seen the truth, not that I'd finally chosen myself and my daughter. I must be crazy influenced having a breakdown. The oldest trick in the gaslighting handbook. Trevor, I'm an architect with a master's degree from MIT. I'm a single mother who's been financially supporting multiple adults for nearly a decade. I assure you I'm perfectly sound of mind. If my family continues to harass your staff, please feel free to involve security. Understood, Ms. Vance. I apologize for the inconvenience. Not at all. Thank you for confirming what I already knew, that when the money stops, the mask drops. After I hung up, I received a text from Mark with a photo attached. My mother, father, and brother sitting in the bank lobby, my mother's face red and blotchy, clearly mid-meltdown. The text read, "Look what you're doing to Mom. Are you happy now?" I stared at that photo for a long moment, at my mother's performance of devastation, at my father's blank enabling, at my brother's casual cruelty in documenting and weaponizing the whole thing. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, just a calm, clear certainty that I'd made the right choice. I texted back one sentence. "I'm teaching my daughter that her worth isn't negotiable. You should try it sometime." Then I blocked his number. Around noon, as I was making grilled cheese sandwiches for Lily, my phone rang with yet another unknown number. "Eleanor, it's Aunt Lisa, my mother's sister. A woman I hadn't spoken to in over 8 years since she'd moved to Fort Myers and disconnected from everyone except at Christmas. Your mother called me. She's beside herself. She said you froze her out financially on Mother's Day. Eleanor, how could you be so cruel?" And there it was, the smear campaign, the narrative rewrite. Suddenly, I wasn't the daughter who'd been insulted and whose child had been rejected. I was the villain who'd cruelly cut off her family's access to money on a sacred holiday. "Aunt Lisa, did Mom tell you what she said to Lily?" Silence. "Did she mention that she told my 8-year-old daughter that she wasn't good enough to attend Mother's Day lunch, that Lily spent 3 days making a card that she'll never get to give, that my baby girl cried because her own grandmother rejected her?" More silence, heavier this time. "Did Mom explain that she and Mark and Olivia went to an expensive restaurant fully expecting me to pay for their $300 per person prix-fixe meal after telling my child she wasn't family? She didn't mention that part." "Of course she didn't. She never mentions context, just consequences. I'm not punishing anyone, Aunt Lisa. I'm protecting my daughter. There's a difference." I could hear her breathing on the other end, processing, recalibrating. "Eleanor, I didn't know. Patricia said you'd had some kind of breakdown." "No breakdown, just boundaries, finally." I ended the call gently but firmly, then blocked Aunt Lisa's number too. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Every family member who called would hear the same story, the same version where I was unreasonable and they were victims. Fighting that narrative would consume me. Better to step out of the story entirely. By late afternoon, my mother tried a different approach, a FaceTime call. I answered out of morbid curiosity. Her face filled my screen eyes, red and swollen, makeup smeared. She was holding something, Lily's baby blanket, the one we'd left at her house years ago. She clutched it like a prop, a visual aid in the theater of emotional manipulation. "Eleanor, please. Family fights, I understand that, but money shouldn't come between us. You can reverse all of this. We can forget it happened." "Forget?" The word tasted like poison. "You want me to forget that you told my daughter she wasn't good enough?" "I never said that. You said she wasn't real family, that Mother's Day was for children who appreciate what they have. What exactly do you think an 8-year-old hears when you say that Mom?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed. For once, she had no response prepared. "I'm not reversing anything." I continued, my voice steady and cold. "This is the first time in my life I've refused to enable your cruelty, and you can't stand it. You're not crying because you lost a daughter. You're crying because you lost access to my bank account." Her face transformed grief, morphing into fury in real time. "How dare you after everything we've done for you?" "What have you done for me, Mom? Really, I'd love to hear the itemized list." "We raised you." That's called basic parenting. That's not debt. That's not leverage. That's the bare minimum of what you signed up for when you decided to have children. We gave you everything. You gave me obligations and guilt and the belief that I only mattered when I was useful. You taught me that love comes with price tags and conditions. Well, congratulations. I finally learned the lesson. I ended the call while she was mid-sentence, her voice still ringing with indignation. Lily appeared in this doorway, her elephant tucked under one arm. "Mommy, are you okay?" I pulled her onto my lap, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her solid warmth against my chest. "I'm better than okay, baby. I'm breaking a cycle that should have been broken a long time ago." That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my lawyer's voice on speakerphone. David Miller, no relation to the David who'd almost been my husband, walked me through the final legal steps. All joint accounts dissolved, all authorized user access terminated, all automatic payment authorizations canceled. You're legally and financially separated from your family's obligations. No one can claim any further right to your resources without your explicit documented consent. And if they try, then it's attempted fraud and you contact me immediately. Eleanor, you've done everything correctly. You've protected yourself and your daughter. Now you just have to hold the line. I can do that. I believe you can. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the city lights twinkling through the windows like distant stars. Somewhere out there, my family was probably still plotting, still scheming, still certain that I'd crack and come crawling back. They didn't understand yet. Maybe they never would. This wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even punishment, though it might feel like it from their perspective. This was freedom. The next morning, I took Lily to the Arnold Arboretum. We walked through paths lined with lilacs and magnolias, their blooms heavy and sweet in the late spring air. Lily ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the trees, and I felt something in my chest unclench for the first time in years. "Mommy, look!" She pointed to a butterfly struggling to emerge from its chrysalis hanging from a branch at eye level. We watched in silence as it pushed and fought its wings, slowly unfurling damp and crumpled. "Is it going to be okay?" Lily whispered. "Yes, baby, it just needs time. Sometimes you have to struggle to become who you're meant to be, and once you break free, you can fly." She slipped her hand into mine, and we stood there together watching new life emerge from something that had looked like death. In the days that followed, the calls and texts gradually decreased. My family realized that their usual tactics weren't working, that the daughter they'd conditioned into compliance had somehow found a spine they didn't know she had. Robert called once at nearly 11 p.m., his voice quiet and small in a way I'd never heard before. "Your mother can't stop crying," he said. "Mark feels humiliated. They feel betrayed." I stared at the ceiling of my bedroom, counting the shadows cast by the streetlight outside. "I felt that way for 30 years, Dad. You just never noticed because my pain was convenient." "That's not fair, isn't it?" "When's the last time you asked how I was doing? Not what I could contribute, not what I could pay for. When did you last ask if I was happy, if I was struggling, if I needed anything?" The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "I don't know," he finally whispered. "Neither do I, Dad. That's the problem. Your mother thinks you'll never speak to us again." "I never said that. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just opting out of a system that was destroying me. If you want a relationship with me, it'll have to be different. It'll have to be real, and it'll have to include respecting my daughter." "I don't know if she can do that." "Then I guess she's made her choice." He hung up without saying goodbye, and I felt the weight of that conversation settle over me like snow. Quiet, cold, inevitable. My father had always been the weak link, the enabler, the one who went along to get along. Part of me had hoped he might be different, might choose differently when forced to pick a side. But hope is a dangerous thing when you've spent a lifetime feeding it crumbs. Weeks passed, then months. My life continued reshaped and restructured around absence and presence in equal measure. Absent was the constant anxiety about who needed what, the calculations about whether I could afford both my bills and theirs, the knot in my stomach when my phone rang. Present was peace, space, time with my daughter that wasn't overshadowed by obligation. Career opportunities I finally had the energy to pursue. A therapy appointment every Thursday where I slowly untangled the web of conditioning and guilt they'd woven around my self-worth. I got a promotion at work, lead architect on a community center project in Roxbury, something meaningful and beautiful that would serve families who actually wanted to be together. Lily started taking art classes. Her teacher said she had talent, that her use of color was remarkable for her age. I hung every single piece on our refrigerator, a gallery of childhood that was finally allowed to be exactly that. Childhood, without shadows. Around Thanksgiving, 6 months after Mother's Day, I got a card in the mail. My mother's handwriting on the envelope, her distinctive loops and swirls that used to make my heart race with anxiety. I stared at it for 3 days before opening it. Inside was a single card blank, except for 3 words in her handwriting: I was wrong. No explanation, no apology to Lily, no acknowledgement of the years of financial exploitation. Just 3 words that were somehow both too much and not nearly enough. I showed it to my therapist. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to believe she means it. Part of me knows this is just another strategy." What would it take for you to believe her? Time, changed behavior, respect for my boundaries, an apology to my daughter that she actually means, a relationship that doesn't revolve around money. Those are reasonable requirements. They'll never meet them. Maybe not, but you're not responsible for their choices, only yours. I kept the card, but I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd learned something crucial. Silence is also an answer. Sometimes it's the clearest answer of all. Christmas came and went. I got cards from Robert and Patricia money for Lily that I put directly into her college fund without comment. Mark sent a friend request on Facebook that I ignored. Olivia got engaged and didn't invite me to the wedding. I felt nothing about it except a distant sadness for the family we could have been but never were. Lily asked about them sometimes, usually at night when defenses were low and questions felt safer in the dark. "Do you think Grandma will ever love me, Mommy?" I think Grandma loves the idea of family more than she loves the actual work of it, baby. And that's not about you. That's about her. You are lovable exactly as you are. "Do you think we'll see them again?" Maybe someday if they can learn to treat us with respect. But if they can't, we'll be okay. We have each other and that's enough. And it was. It really, truly was. By the time Mother's Day rolled around again a full year after everything changed, I took Lily to brunch at a little cafe in Cambridge. Just the 2 of us. She made me a card, this one covered in butterflies and flowers, and the words, "Best Mom Ever," in neater handwriting than the year before. We ate French toast and laughed at inside jokes and made plans for the summer. No drama, no obligation, no anxiety about who would call demanding what. Just us. Just peace. Just the life I'd built from the ashes of the one they'd tried to keep me trapped in. As we walked home through streets dappled with spring sunlight, Lily looked up at me with those serious dark eyes that saw more than any child should have to. "Mommy, are you happy now?" I squeezed her hand, feeling the solid certainty of her small fingers wrapped around mine. "Yes, baby. For the first time in a very long time, I really am." And I meant it. Because here's what I learned in that year of silence and separation, and slowly rebuilding myself from the inside out. You can't fix people who don't think they're broken. You can't make people value you if they're determined to see you as a resource. You can't save relationships where only one person is willing to do the actual work of loving. But you can save yourself. You can choose yourself. You can look at your child and decide that breaking the cycle matters more than keeping the peace. You can draw a line in the sand and mean it even when your hand shakes, even when you're terrified, even when everyone tells you that family is supposed to forgive everything. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own destruction. Sometimes the scars you earn from standing up for yourself are the most beautiful thing you'll ever wear. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 33 years old. I'm an architect, a mother, a woman who finally learned that her value doesn't come from her bank account balance. And if you're reading this, if any part of this story resonates with you, if you've ever been made to feel like your only purpose is to give until there's nothing left, I want you to know something. You deserve more than conditional love. You deserve more than being someone's emergency fund. You deserve more than relationships that only exist when you're useful. You deserve to be someone's priority, not their backup plan. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. You deserve to say no without explanation, justification, or apology. And you deserve to build a life where you're not constantly walking on eggshells around people who should be walking on water for you. So here's my question for you, because I genuinely want to know. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? What did you choose, and do you regret it? Drop your answer in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story made you feel seen. Subscribe if you want more stories about real people making impossible choices and coming out stronger on the other side. And remember, breaking free doesn't make you the villain. It makes you the author of your own story. And darling, it's time you wrote yourself a better ending.